Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with new humanitarian action from Israel following a call between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The White House had warned the U.S. could change its policy unless Israel takes action to protect civilians and aid workers in Gaza. Israeli strikes killed 7 aid workers in the Palestinian territory on Monday. Also on Thursday, smoke could be seen rising over Rafah in southern Gaza. Israel remains determined to invade the city. The U.S. is trying to persuade it not to do so. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes has more on what the two countries are discussing.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken issued a new but vaguely worded warning for Israel today.
If we don't see the changes that we need to see, there'll be changes in our own policy.
President Biden delivered a similar message in a direct 30-minute phone call with Israel's prime minister. He made clear, the White House said, that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza hinges on Israel's immediate action to better protect civilians.
What exactly is the warning that's being issued here?
I'm not going to preview steps. I'm not going to preview decisions that haven't been made yet, but there are things that need to be done.
The warning comes as a growing number of Democratic senators push the White House to impose new conditions on military aid to Israel after the deaths of an estimated 30,000 Palestinians and roughly 200 humanitarian workers. The 7 workers from World Central Kitchen were driving in a safe zone in marked vehicles and had registered their movements with the Israeli military. But they were targeted by missiles anyway in what the Israelis say was a mistake. Vermont Senator Peter Welch.
Frankly, I think we're coming to the point where the president is going to have to make a profound decision, and that is, are we going to stop sending U.S. munitions to Israel that are used in Gaza?
The U.S. gives Israel more than $3 billion worth of military aid every year and has approved another transfer that includes more than 1,000 500 and 2,000-pound bombs.
The United States' support for Israel's ability to defend itself from a range of threats, not just Hamas, remains ironclad.
And Nancy joins us from the White House now. Nancy, it's great to see you. CBS News has learned President Biden made a number of requests to Prime Minister Netanyahu. What were they?
He had specific gates and crossings and ports, Meg, that he wanted Netanyahu to open right away to allow more humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. And we are learning now that Netanyahu appears to be following through, allowing the reopening for the first time since this conflict began on October 7th, the Eretz crossing, that's in the north of Gaza, along with the Ashdod port and the Kerem Shalom crossing to allow more trucks to get from Jordan across Israel and into Gaza. So if these crossings do open, they will be a sign that Netanyahu heard the message that was being delivered from the president, the vice president, and the secretary of state about major changes that need to be made by Israel to keep U.S. support in the same state that it is now.
Those are big developments. And also, Nancy, as you mentioned in your piece, both the president and Secretary of State Antony Blinken say the U.S. is poised to change its policy toward Israel if the country doesn't adjust its methods of protecting aid workers and civilians. Right. What kind of policy change are we talking about here?
It's easier to describe the kinds of policy changes that we aren't discussing here because the White House was incredibly vague, wouldn't tell us what kinds of changes they're considering. But one thing that appears to be off the table is any kind of new conditioning of military aid or halting of military aid. White House officials say there is no change in U.S. support for Israel's right to defend itself. So it would appear that that's off the table. The question is then, what is backing up this threat? If Israel doesn't follow through, and they say Israel has days, not weeks, to make changes and announce them that will show that Israel is more committed to protecting civilians and protecting humanitarian workers. If they don't do that, it's really unclear at this point how the U.S. will respond.
All right. The very latest from Nancy Cordes. Thank you.
You're welcome.